He was a ruler. He had a lot of money. A lot of people enjoyed his company. He was an important person. But when he found God, was his life better or was his life worse? If you value money more than God, then you would say his life was worse. But if you value God more than money, then you would say that his life was better. See, anytime you get to know God more, anytime God gets to grow in your life more, you have a victory that is beyond a victory just in this world. You have life, not just life here, but you have life after this world and you have life in this world. Because victory comes from the fact of who I'm connected to. If I'm connected to God, who is great, even if I don't feel great, the more I know God is the more victory I receive in my life. Is it because the more I get to understand what life is and I get to understand who I am and I get to understand who God is. It's a little complicated, but I'm going to make it much easier. Is that it's not a good thing to not understand who you are when you're great. You see, they took away Moses' money. They took away Moses' clothes. They put the brother in a desert, or he ran away to a desert, and he was living in the desert, but God had already made him a prince. A prince was not something that somebody gave to him. A prince was what he was in his spirit. So now when God calls him and says, I want you to go and to set my people free, Moses doesn't have an issue when it comes to having the courage to speak to the people to set the people free. His concern was, God, how are you going to do it? You see, some people would never go to Egypt, not because of them not understanding how God's going to do it. It's because they feel less than the Pharaoh who they're going to talk to. Pharaoh perceived himself to be God. This man had all power. You see, we complain about the guy down south who thinks he's God, but he doesn't have all power. But Pharaoh had all power that if you came and you spoke to him and you criticized him, he doesn't just say, okay, we're going to, deal with this in the media or whatever. He kills you. So Moses is going to a God who has all power. And he never says to God, can you protect me from this Pharaoh? Because Moses went through a process where his mind was renewed and he perceived himself to be on the same footing as a man who thought he was God. You see, we look at the miracle of Moses, what Moses does, but we don't look at the mentality of Moses. That Moses, before there was ever a parting of the Red Sea, he perceived himself to be equal to Pharaoh. He stood up before a man who had all power, and he perceived himself to be on the same level as that man, because he never says to God, at any time does he ever say to God, God, I feel less than this man I'm going to talk to. Most of us, if we're going to go talk to the prime minister, we're going to go talk to billionaires, our first question would not be, God, how are you going to do it? Our first question is, why me? Because we have a perception that the person we're talking to is greater than we are. But Moses never has that problem because God worked in his mind a process that you are victorious before you even got into a fight. Before the man ever even got into a situation, he perceived himself to be great. So he never ever struggles with, am I important enough to talk to Pharaoh? He struggles with, God, if I talk to this guy, how are you going to get the people out? Not how are you going to get me out, how are you going to get the people out? Because it didn't logically make sense to him. But logically it made sense to him that a man who thought he was God, he was equal to that man. You see, we oftentimes look at our situation and define whether we're victorious by our situation. How much money do I have in the bank? Oh, it's negative. I'm not important. What position do I have at work? Oh, they fired me. I'm not important. What community do I live in? It's not that nice. I'm not important because we define ourselves by our environment. But victory is never given to you through your environment. Victory is given to you through your mindset, through your mentality. And Moses, no matter where he lived, no matter what he wore, no matter what people, no matter what job he did, he perceived himself to be equal to a man who thought he was God. Because Moses said that I grew up in the same house as this guy. I ate the same food as he ate. I lived on the same planet that this man lived on. He has 2 feet, I have 2 feet. He has 2 arms, I have 2 arms. He has 2 eyes, I have 2 eyes. There's no difference between the Pharaoh and me, except I'm obedient to God and he's not. So if anybody is superior out of the two of us, it's the one who's following God. The reason why I say this is because you will never receive victory until you realize that victory is not dependent upon your environment. Amen. Victory is dependent upon your mindset. That you have to believe that you have victory before you even get into a fight. Moses is a very interesting person because he's not perfect. The Bible says that Moses has a speech impediment. He has a speech impediment. Some of us, we struggle in terms of different areas of our talking. Some people, they have lisps. Some people, they stutter. But there are other people where it's very difficult to understand them, where their speech impediment actually interrupts their ability to communicate. A lot of great speakers, if you listen to them close enough, you'll see that they have a speech impediment. That some people, they stutter. But their stuttering doesn't distract from what they're saying. Some speakers, they have a lisp, or they pronounce certain words in a way because of the way their mouth is shaped, and they mispronounce things. But it's never so bad that you can't understand them. But Moses was saying, God, I have a problem with how I speak. That when I speak, people can't understand me. I stutter to such an extent that I cannot communicate. It's not that I'm afraid to talk. It's that when I talk, people can't understand what I'm talking about. So in the mind of a human being, that would be perceived as a failure. But what I like about Moses is that Moses, you see, with us, we stutter a little bit and we feel self-conscious. This man stutters and you can't understand it, and he's still willing to speak for God. Do you ever think about how much of a mind of victory you have to have a problem that everybody's laughing at, to have a problem that everybody can't understand? Like, what are you talking? I can't understand the words that are coming out of your mouth. I can't understand what you're saying. But yet he still had enough confidence to speak. The reason why I bring that up is that Moses had a lot of problems. But his confidence in himself and his confidence in God was not one of his problems. And victory primarily comes from you maintaining a positive image of God and a positive image of yourself. The enemy will always attack your image of God and will always attack your image of yourself. In fact, he usually attacks first your image of God. Because if he can get you to see God as negative, if he can get you to see God as evil, if he can get you to see God as not telling the truth, if he can get you to see God as not able to empower you, if he can get you to see God in a negative mindset, you won't believe in God. And if you don't believe in God, then when it comes to the attack on yourself, you have no protection. Because if God's not real, then what is the purpose of my life? If I don't have a purpose for my life, then how can I tell somebody else what to do? If I can't tell somebody else what to do, then what am I going to do with my day? And it keeps going down until you have no victory. Because victory is given to a person based upon a score. And what I learned about sports, if you're going to use sports for example, when you don't have a referee, it makes the game harder. When you don't have rules, it makes the game impossible. You cannot win a sport if you do not keep score. You cannot keep score well if you don't have a referee. And you cannot have a game if you don't have rules. You cannot have victory unless there's somebody who wins and there's somebody who loses. So in the mindset of our 21st century community, we feel that children should not win and lose. Everybody should get a chance to win. Everybody should, there shouldn't be any winner, there shouldn't be a lose. Everybody's exactly the same. And the problem with that is that you don't have purpose when there are no rules. If everybody can be a brain surgeon, nobody would have brain surgery. Okay, who would come to Pastor Solomon and get brain surgery from me and give me $100,000 to do brain surgery on you. I never been to school. I failed chemistry. I failed biology. Actually, I can take that back. I did good in biology. Algebra. I failed the next thing in math. I can't even remember what it's called. Who is going to come so I can open up your brain and take out a tumor? If you're wise, you won't come to me because I don't know what I'm doing. And the reason why you know I don't know what I'm doing is because I gave you a series of tests I failed that the brain surgeon took and passed. And he took further classes to make him an expert in dealing with your brain. And even with him, I don't fully trust him with my brain. But I would trust him more than anybody else in this room unless you are a qualified brain surgeon. Because life has rules. And within the rules of life, there's winning and there's losing. The losing informs you as it relates to your progress. If you lose less in an area, then that means that you're progressing more in that area. If you lose more in an area, that means that you are digressing more in that area. Are you following what I'm saying? The problem in life is that nobody likes to lose. So life tries to teach us to either eliminate ourselves so we disappear, or to cause everybody to be equal. And we are equal as it relates to our essence in God, as it relates to us being princes of God and princesses of God. We're equal in that respect, but we're not equal as it relates to our calling, our purpose, and our ability. You see, every time I lose, God is informing me about something about me that needs to change, or He's informing to me a new direction. Now, I have a friend who said to me that, no, when it comes to math, the reason why you didn't do math well is because you didn't put the work in. If you put the work in, you would have done well in math. And I said, you know what, that's true. They didn't put the work in. So I inspire every child to put the work in. But after you put the work in, and you find it really hard to get an A in math, and you find it really easy to get an A in business, you might want to consider doing business. And you got to continue in math per se, but you might not want to be a brain surgeon or a physicist or anything dealing, or an architect or anything dealing with math, because there's a struggle there. But why am I saying this? Is that in life, there's winning and losing. Some of our losses have come because of interference. People have come into our life and have interfered and done things that have held us back. But I'm not so much talking about that. I'm talking about when you do something with an honest effort and you find that there's failure, you have to learn from those failures. So when I went to math class, I'm just going to talk about myself for a bit. One of the reasons why I struggled in math was because I was socializing with people in the class. And I like getting along with people. And I like talking to people. And I like hearing about people's day more than I like hearing about the numbers. You see, sometimes as a parent you get mad and say, why are you not listening? But sometimes you need to look at the behavior, because what I realized was I like socializing. So maybe, in my future, I should do something dealing with people instead of dealing with numbers and accounting, because I'm not so good at that. It says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. One of the difficulties in life, as it relates to having victory, is that you feel like you're by yourself. Especially when you feel like, God's giving you a particular gift, or you feel like, you want to do something in your life. A lot of times you feel like you're by yourself. For example, you might want to become a pilot. You go to your mom and say, Mom, I want to be a pilot. She says, what are you talking about? You want to fly up there and die? You know how much pilots die? And the concept never comes to you. You know how many people fly planes? How did you get from this country, from the country that you came from? Somebody flew you. So why can't that be your daughter? Why can't that be your son? Well, what happens anytime God gives you a dream is that we oftentimes share it with everybody, and the people who respond the fastest are the negative people. And they tell you, you know, where you're not going to make it, or they tell you about your failure, or they tell you about your inability, and they cause you to let go of the things that you dream of doing. Now, in fairness, I've heard some people say some things to me that I'm like, man, you can never do that. For example, I'm in my 40s. When a friend of mine comes up to me and says that they want to be a brain surgeon, and they got lower marks than me in math, everything in me tells me, you can't do that. You're going to go, by the time you graduate, you're going to be 80. I don't want no 80-year-old man working on my brain. Because what I'm saying is that you got to, in the honesty of your mind, that doesn't seem to match up. But if God tells a man or a woman who's 40 to go and do brain surgery, do it. Because not everything has to make sense. All that you need to do is to ask yourself, do you have the ability to win and lose along the way and continue on the course in the line that God called you to do? Now for me, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to be a brain surgeon. I X that out of my mind. I'm not going to be president or prime minister. I X that out of my mind. There are a lot of things that I'm not going to be because I just decided that that's not in me to become. But whatever God has put in me to become, I've decided I'm going to become it.